I'm Lee Bristow, host of Saros Insights and Director of Cyber and AI Governance. At Saros, we partner with the world's most recognized brands to make the complex simple. My aim is to deconstruct the strategies of Ireland's top business leaders, from AI governance, digital transformation, and some that are even scaling through acquisition. We're playing a bigger game, uncovering the human stories behind the technology. Welcome to our show. Today we are chatting with Rachel. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Lee.
So Rachel, to start, let's talk about your career history. You started as a barrister in the Irish courts and you've now entered the wide world of AI startups, and there was a whole bunch of stuff in between. So please take us through the journey that allowed you to land in this seat.
Yeah, so I did. I started out as a barrister a very long time ago. I'm not going to tell you how long because that will give away my age. So I started out at the bar and I was there for about 2.5, 3 years. Decided after that I kind of really wanted to go in-house. So I went into HP. I was there for 2 years. And after HP, when I was there, I liked the idea of being in a team, all that kind of thing. And then I just decided I really wanted to go into something just a bit faster paced. So I ended up going into a startup. I was there for just under 4 years, and then I moved into, before I went into Zendesk, we went away to the Turks and Caicos Islands for 2 years. So I spent a lovely 2 years on a beach on maternity leave with my second child. So it was really, really nice. My husband was working there he's a lawyer as well. So that was really, really nice. And then I got very bored, which is kind of a little bit of how I am, which is probably why I'm in startups. And I applied into Zendesk, which was me sitting at a desk with a suit on, wearing the pair of shorts underneath. And I got the job at Zendesk and I was delighted. And I ended up going straight from the Turks and Caicos to San Francisco for some training, which was amazing. So it was brilliant and probably the best decision I've ever made. So obviously beside my children, in case they're listening to this at some point. And so I was placed in the UK initially. So I went to the UK and that was just before GDPR came in. And because I was there, I ended up being the first person I was their first hire outside of the US. So I ended up dealing with everything privacy related. And that's how I got into the privacy angle. So I was first commercial, then privacy, became their global head of privacy. And then just from a whole connections perspective, I got to know their global head of sales, moved from that into the next company, went with him to Netlify as their global head of legal. And then from Netlify, I knew Matt Price, who's also the CEO of the company I'm in now, and moved with him. He was also at Zendesk, so I also moved in there too. So all my connections have kind of moved me into my role. So it's been really, it's been great. And it's just, it's kind of just moved from one thing to the other. But commercial and privacy have been the backbone of that. And I think privacy lends itself naturally to AI, obviously. So that's where I've kind of, moved from.
And you in Crescendo now, and you've been with them for about 9 months?
It's a year. Well, it'll be a year in January, Yeah.
Before our chat, one of the things that you were saying is that you had almost started your next journey onto the Eat, Pray, Love angle, and then it didn't quite work out the way that you wanted to. But the startup world called you back.
Yeah, so I left Netlify and I was really tired because it was like 3.5 years of a sprint of a startup, and I said, okay, I'm going to take some time out. As I said, I was going to do this Eat, Pray, Love thing for I had in mind this whole thing of I'll go to Bali and I'll do a whole month. And I was okay, it's actually going to be a week, maybe, because I've got 4 children, so that was never going to work. And I left, and then I got a phone call from Matt, who's the CEO of the place I'm in, Crescendo, and he said, look, I heard you're available. Will you come and help me out? I'm the CEO of the startup and we're 12 people at the moment and I need a lawyer. And I was oh God, anyway, I was going on holidays the next day with my family and I said, look, I'm away for the next 3 weeks. So, he said, so anyway, he'll kill me now. He'd be don't make it sound like I begged you to come. So anyway, I came back and I started doing some consulting work, because at the time we were only this amount of people. And we went from, it was about 12 of us to begin with. And we went from 12 to about 50 quite rapidly. And then we acquired Partner Hero, which is a BPO. So we were the SaaS side of the house, which was all tech, the AI side. We acquired Partner Hero and they were 3,000, I think around 3,200 people, 3,400, give or take, because you kind of move up and down with the BPO side. And we acquired them overnight. So that was a big change. So we went from a very, very small company to a very big company. And that obviously came with its challenges, but it also came with huge benefits, which have greatly outweighed, obviously, the I suppose, challenges that it came with. So it was amazing. Really, really great. Yeah. So
I mean, that's quite a story,
Yeah,
right? Literally from going on holiday for an Eat, Pray, Love moment into a 12-person startup into, 3,000 employee in the space of 9 months, basically.
Yeah. So I did that I was kind of consulting just for a couple of months. And then they said to me, look, will you come on full time? Just as we started integrating the acquisition. And at that point, there was no legal team. So I pulled together the legal team from what was in the Partner Hero side of the business. So they had one lawyer who sat in under IT, which is the strange place to have legal anyway. But it made sense for them because he was doing security and privacy work. So that fitted in with where it was. Yeah. And then they had a contracts team that sat under solutions, which I suppose solutions is kind of like it kind of makes sense too. Yeah. So we pulled them up and we made a legal team. So and I started in January. So
and you now head that legal team up.
Yeah, so I head the legal team up and I look after workplace as well. So I have a team of 11 people under workplace, and I also look after security at the moment until we hire a CISO. So that also under security is IT and compliance. So yeah, it's a
big portfolio.
It's a busy time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I really love that leadership story. 12 people to 3,000, literally at 9 months is overnight primarily, right? So, how, just in terms of navigating that, how did you look at that from a people perspective? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I think once you're over the legal hurdles and the financial hurdles, it's the integration piece around that. So how do you take a 50-person culture into a 3,000, or is that actually not how it works?
I think so. We obviously had lots of integration plans and we kind of thought about it. I think a playbook's, I won't say it goes out the window, but you have to rethink it, and you have to rethink it constantly as you go along. Anyone who comes from a SaaS background and probably a SaaS startup background, thinks very quickly and makes decisions very quickly. Yeah. We were acquiring an operations-based company, and it's probably a slower moving beast, but it is a beast because it's 3,000 people and there's a lot more people to make decisions and everything else. So, but what we did acquire was, and this was one of the things that they looked for when they were looking for a particular BPO, they looked for a culture-based fit as well. And that was really important. And from a culture perspective, everybody in there, the culture is amazing. Shervin, who's the CEO of that company, he really developed a beautiful culture. Just everybody is super nice. Everybody looks after each other. We never felt that it was hard to integrate because they were a really close-knit family. And I don't mean family sounds a bit like, your work family, but they really are very close. You go along and people know, they could tell you about other people's families. They could tell you everything. And that was a really nice thing to be able to see. It just felt really nice. So I think culture is the one thing. And then the second thing was that we went from having, when I started, we were using one particular tech stack, which I won't name, but it was really clunky just for doing online meetings. And they were using a different one. And we were like, we want that one. So it was they had better tech in place. And it was okay, well, we're not going to tell you to come and use ours. We're actually going to acquire yours. So they did have better policies in place. We were a startup. We didn't have a lot of that. So you're constantly, and that's actually why I love what I do, because you're constantly making up policies, you're constantly, and that's not because I love policies, it's just because you're constantly reinventing the wheel, and you're constantly kind of thinking, well, what makes sense here? I'm going to redo this. I'm going to rethink this.
Because your strategy changes, right? And as your strategy changes, your underlying governance structures need to change with that.
Yeah, constantly, all the time, which is really nice because you get to shape the company and you get to mold it and you get to grow it. And, you know, you find something that you're like, oh, wow, this can really supercharge how we do our work. So let's implement this. And you get to implement it, which is really cool. So like, it's amazing. So, you know, and you get to roll things out and you're like, this is incredible. I've just made so much change here. You don't really get to do that in a lot of roles. So that's why I like it. But on that whole tech stack, so there was a whole big, that was part of the IT integration, the people integration, even down to, like with that amount of people, the biggest thing in the legal side for me was looking at the people side of things from the employment perspective. That was huge, trying to figure all that out. And then we had the IT piece and a branding perspective. Branding came a little bit later for us. Obviously, there's the whole commercial sales piece and why we bought the company and, you know, conversion of customers. But from the actual integration piece, and probably back to what Saros does, IT integration was huge. Figuring out which platforms make sense, like moving over to those platforms, and then looking at what they did and trying to make those processes better, because they had been in place for 10 years. And we could look at it with fresh eyes and say, right, we don't think this makes sense. Let's. And they also, I suppose, didn't necessarily, like, we just had funding. So we had lots of money to pour into this and go, okay, well, you don't have a contract management system in place, for example, across the company. Let's get one and stop using Google Drive. Like, I have a contract manager who is the most, I keep saying to her, she's like the lady who does the folding of clothes in, you know, that really famous lady, I don't know if you know her name. No. Anyway, she does the folding of clothes. She's written a book on like how she organises people's drawers and everything. I can't remember her name. But anyway, she's like that. She's just the most organised person I've ever met in my life. She showed me all like these Google Drives of like every single contract across the company. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is incredible. But like, this is taking up so much of your time.
Just consistently managing that. Yeah.
So let's bring in a CMS. I want you to buy into it though. I wanted her to like it so that she would want to do, well, like, you know, do the work to put it in place. We got this contract management system and now she is working it and putting it in. So she's now free to do more stuff and focus on actually what she likes doing, which is learning to draft. She wants to go to law school. So we're kind of focusing on that, helping her career build. And she's not spending all her time filing documents into like this huge, big contract repository in Google Drive, which she can't even pull analytics from, which is, then we went off and got a piece of, you know, a contract management system with AI in it that can pull all that stuff. So it was a little bit about refining processes, looking at what didn't make sense anymore and making them better. So it was interesting.
I really love that little story because it kind of extrapolates out in terms of what Crescendo is actually doing, which is around actually doing or figuring out how to do the cognitive offloading. Is using AI to deliver better services. And, you know, that was just an example, an internal example of how Crescendo is actually doing it in terms of just contract management. So it actually talks to the back end of the way that you're working in terms of the delivery that you're providing to your clients. So, you know, I think one of the pieces of the puzzle that we haven't chatted about is the reason why the acquisition happened, which was to actually bring about a different kind of licensing model. And I think that is probably the most interesting piece there because it's moving away from the typical SaaS model, which is the more the company that you're selling into is broken, the more licenses you get, more stickiness you get. And then from a people perspective in terms of providing professional services, it's almost like, again, if the volume increases, it's more bums in seats and all the rest of it. You've turned it on its head and basically said, well, we're gonna charge per outcome. And it's about a value-driven it's value-driven outcomes. It's an amazing kind of new model. And yeah, I really love that. And you know, have you got any like key use cases or cool stories that have come out from clients that have kind of seen this and really adopted it?
Yeah, well, I think I think part of the reason we went and adopted it was obviously when you start to look at agent-based pricing. So when you have AI in place, you can't charge people anymore for a bum in seat, if you want to say it like that. Like an agent-based model it's charging you for that person sitting there. And when you're telling someone you need to be more efficient and they're saying, great, how are they going to be more efficient if you're literally charging for the person? You're not charging for how quickly they can do. So AI is there. It's meant to make them quicker, more efficient at their role. The idea is that they are 10 times more efficient. So you give them AI to do their job, but how are you measuring that? So it really should be based on the outcome of that. So we moved to outcome-based pricing on the, I suppose, what we want to do is give people more value, say to them, you're only going to pay for, we call it a conversation. We had an internal debate about whether we would call it a resolution or a conversation. And because there's a lot of other AI chatbot companies out there that what they do is they would only give you the AI chatbot, but because we give you the AI chatbot plus the BPO, so we manage the whole service for you, we define it as a conversation because it's a slightly longer piece. Well, it's not slightly longer, it is longer. We do the whole thing, so we do it as a conversation. And what we also do is we brought out an outcome guarantee as well, which we also say you don't pay for any dissatisfied outcomes. So if you'd have any outcome that your customer says they're not dissatisfied, you don't pay for it. So the idea is that if you're not winning, we don't win. So it incentivizes us to make sure that you are satisfied and the customer is satisfied. Because at the end of the day, customer service is all about your customer being happy. And if your customer isn't happy, you're not doing well, we don't do well. So it's like everybody has to win. And that's where that comes in. Agent-based pricing in the SaaS model doesn't work like that, and it's never worked like that. And you'll find that, I think, with that agent model, if people don't move to that outcome-based pricing, they don't start providing these guarantees around it, they're probably just going to fall behind in terms of where that is. So that's really why we did it. It is, I think people, they want results, they want it, it's interesting now, like I think people as well have been not slow to adopt, but people, there's lots of cases, where people think of, you get to a chatbot and you're like, speak to a human, speak to a human, speak to a human. And they're like, and I've done it myself because
I do it to I do it too.
Seriously. And then I'm like, you need to change your chat model. Who's your provider? And there's some that are so terrible. I'm like, oh my God. But
feel free to name and shame.
Yeah, no, I won't. But like some of them are just so bad. And but there are some it will move and people are not going to accept that customer service anymore because customer service is so good now. And chatbots can literally give you everything you need back and you don't need to go through to a human anymore. And I'm not saying, so they will be used only for the really complex cases. And for that, for everything that AI can resolve, you should only really be paying for that outcome. You should not have to pay for every person that's sitting there because it never goes to the person. It should just be everything that's resolved. And if it's not resolved, then you don't pay for it.
I mean, there is a cost associated to that, even if they are just interacting with the AI. So from a model perspective, those tokens that are chewed up, there is a cost associated to that. Again, it will be relatively small because the conversation will be put me to a human, put me to a human. So I actually did that. I phoned in to Vodacom. So I'm going to do a name, shame, and praise. So the name is Vodacom. The shame was the chatbot. I would listen to this thing and it took me about 30 seconds to get to the point where I was just like, human. I want a human now. And eventually they put me to a human. And the praise was literally within 30 seconds. I explained the situation. She was like, not a problem. We'll pass a refund to you. Can we do it back into your bank account? Literally within 4 minutes, I was done. I said, please, can you put me through to whatever mechanism that I can vote on the service? Because it was fantastic. So if they can just fix that first part, it would be an amazing service. But just like having that ability, because clearly the chatbot did pass the information through because she was able to have a way in which to help you quicker.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity there. But coming back to your licensing, how did you actually put in place the legal mechanisms to be able to protect your business from a liability perspective? Because essentially what you're doing is you're almost guaranteeing the outcome. Now I get it that there's a satisfaction element, but legally, was that a complicated process to build out, or was it actually, you know what, we're going to make this super simple and just put it in front of the client?
We tried to keep it simple. So for example, when we were building the terms for the outcome guarantee, which is on the website, we kept it really simple, and we did an FAQ in it, and the idea was we didn't want to make it complicated. So what I said to the team was, you need to tell me what you can do, because so often, and this is like anybody who's in a commercial legal position will know this. So often you're on the phone with sales and they're promising X, Y, and Z, and you're like, what are you saying? No, what?
But if you're not in the room,
and you're like, but they'll come to you and they'll go, can we do X, Y, and Z? Or like, I've told them we can do blah, and you're like, well, or they'll say, can I put this on? Can we say this? And I'm like, well, you could say that, but like, have you checked with product, or have you checked with security? Have you checked with? And they'll like, no. Or like, have you checked with finance? No, I haven't checked that. I'm like, well, you need to go and check if we can actually do that, because I can write anything I want, but actually fulfilling that promise is another thing. So that's the way I look at it when we did the outcome guarantee. I'm like, we can do it, but I want to make sure we can stand behind it. And I will not put anything on that we can't stand behind. So for the terms for that guarantee, it was all around speed, quality, and delivery. And what we wanted was, we want to make sure we can do this. We stand behind it, and the risk to the business is low because we know we can fulfill this. So one of our things is around deployment. We can deploy within 30 days. There's not a lot of companies that can deploy and get people up and running within 30 days.
And that's with a team as well. So that's literally a team that will be able to support that organization's contact center.
Yeah. And the reason we can do that is a lot of, to get you up and running within 30 days, we have to go in, like literally, you sign the contract, and once we have everything that we need from you, so we ask the customer for all of their knowledge documentation, and then we start working on it. Yeah. A lot of the chatbots will say to the customer, okay, here's your platform, take all your knowledge stuff and you put it into the platform, you get it up and running. If you want us to help you, you pay for ProServe. What we do is we take all of your knowledge content, we would say to Saras Consulting, give us everything you have. We then put it into our platform. We will get it all up and running for you, and we have a knowledge manager on our end who will optimize all of that content all the time. We use knowledge API to do it, so it also reduces massively any hallucinations or anything, because we don't add in anything from we don't pull content from public sources or anything like that. So it's just your content that sits in there. And anytime you update policies, anytime you update any of your knowledge base, you send that to us, and we optimize for that as well. So if we see anything that, like say a bot might go in and do, that is like slightly, like it might enhance something, and we're like, oh, that was different, we'll go in and we'll optimize for that. So we are the ones that are tweaking your knowledge base all the time, and we are answering it. And then when it goes to the agents, there are agents as well. So it's all, and we have Agent Assist as well, which gives them, it's the back end AI that also assists for them too. So the whole thing is run by us. So we're the ones responsible for it. So if anything is not right, we look after it. Whereas I've bought a couple of things of AI in the past. I've done it in my previous company, I've done it in this company. And it's also why I've written tender documents now for the whole company. If you want to go out and you want to buy a piece of AI, run through this tender document, make sure it has X, Y, and Z in place, because the issue is that otherwise you're sitting on the phone for ages with someone trying to get that piece of AI to work. In our case, you won't be doing that. And that's why I really liked this product and why I joined the company, because I'm too old to be joining companies that I don't believe in for the product, and I really believed in this. So that is another reason why I joined. So yeah, I think you have to believe in the product, and the product from that perspective is a really good product, because we're not just selling you a piece of AI and then telling you, right, there you go, off you go, make it work yourself. We have to make it work. Otherwise you're not going to stay with us. So
I love the fact that you were kind of driving your own internal procurement around making sure that you buy the right kind of AI tools and technology, or any kind of technology for that matter. When you think about regulatory requirements, now I know this is not necessarily going to be a high risk application of AI in most instances. There may be one or two examples of it, but in most instances it wouldn't. So, you co-founded the AI and Privacy Network to educate lawyers, really to kind of bring privacy knowledge into the legal world going forward. And I think AI is going to be very much part of that conversation. And I think they're very much coupled together, especially when you start looking at the regulatory pieces. So kind of the first core question that I have around that is do you think the AI regulation is going to actually hamper any innovation coming into Europe? Because there is a very big narrative around regulation versus innovation. Where do you stand in that camp, or do you think it's a lot more nuanced in terms of more the bureaucracy or any other elements?
I don't think so. Like the high risk categories, so you've got, low, medium and high. I think the high risk categories are things that most people aren't going to encounter in their daily role. So for ourselves, and actually in the AI and Privacy Network, our last session was actually all around kind of procurement and like buying things in and all this. And actually we had a huge amount of people come to that one. And I knew we had a few people. So the way actually that's set up, for people listening, the way we set it up was about like pre-COVID, a couple of years now. There was a group that met in Dublin, and it was just in-house counsel, and we would just meet up casually, and we would go to law firms and ask them to come and talk to us about certain topics that we needed some education on or we wanted to hear about. And it was incredibly casual, just an email list that went out. And COVID, just everything fell apart. No one wanted to meet on Zoom. It just didn't work. And people liked the networking and just meeting and having a coffee. And most people know each other. Like, it's a small enough group of like who's, if you end up doing a contract with someone, you're like, oh, hiya, how are you? It's you. So after COVID, it didn't, the guy who was doing it was like, I just don't have the time to do it. So I said, do you mind if I take it and run with it? And he said, yeah, absolutely, go for it. So myself and my colleague, an ex-colleague from Zendesk, he was with me in Netlify as well. So we just decided we'd set it up. So we set it up, but we added in AI because it made sense, and we just formalized it a little bit just to, I suppose, make it more of a, give it more of a name, but also, I suppose, if law firms are coming to us, they could, kind of, I suppose, it's just gave it I don't know where, I suppose, give more of a name is where I'm coming to on it. But we've had loads of different topics. The whole idea of it is it's not for profit. It's literally for law firms to come to talk to us. We have had a lot of the requests. So we would say to people, look, if you have a request for a next topic, just let us know. A lot of them have been around the contracting, the buying in of AI. How do you figure out, like, probably with the legislation and buying in and that kind of piece. Yeah. And then initially we did a lot of learning around the AI. Like, we had a professor from UCD come in, he did a brilliant talk on just AI systems and everything, and how the LLM works. And that was very much back at the start. And now people are more savvy and they understand it. And now it's like the pieces of like that's coming across your desk on a daily basis.
So now it's about the use cases, right? So actually applying those use cases in a procurement environment, how they're being actually driven from AI office or AI charter that your organization establishes. That's really where it's come from.
And what's interesting now is sitting with people who, some people have gone AI first, some people are implementing it, and some people have been told to put in policies, and very different stages of where they're all at. And most of them are like, I don't know what to do. And I've had a few people like email me and go, what have you been doing? Like, what is your like stance on this? Like, and they're often different industries. Like, I've one that was, she's in a hospital here. She was like, I don't like, what will I do? I had someone else the other day who's in, he's in a bank, and he was like, they are staying completely away from it. I said, that's super interesting, because I said, literally, I was talking to someone in an investment bank the other day, and they're one of the bigger, like a global investment bank, and they have completely implemented across the board. So like, if you don't, you're going to get left behind. And that is the thing. And I think people are afraid of, I think there's a privacy element, the data element they're all afraid of. There's also an element afraid of, like, from the jobs perspective. And there's a fear of implementing AI across the board. I've seen that with a lot of customers when we've been converting the customer base from the BPO to implement AI on their front end as well.
Yep.
But once they see how the power of it and everything else, they really like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, why haven't I been using this before? So what we did for us across the board was, we were like, okay, we need to be AI first. We're an AI company. We need to do this. How do we do it? So we decided we'd roll AI out across the entire company. So we've got a lot of agents, we call them live associates, all across the world. And we were like, well, how do we roll it out to them? How do they use it safely? So and a lot of this comes down to risk-based approach.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out, what is your risk tolerance across the company? And so we looked at the EU AI Act, and that is bringing back in the regulatory side of it.
Yep.
Mapped it out, put it in a policy, and decided. So we worked with, and one of the first things we did was put in place, so I said, like, we need an AI governance committee. So we have legal, security, privacy, HR, and product on that. So we would meet and decide, we put a policy together, and then we all signed off on that. The policy, it's very much around, these are high risk, medium and low. High is more on the HR side of the house.
Yeah.
Like, it's the profiling, it's the comparing, employees, like, you can't use tools for that kind of thing. They were the use cases that we said, look, you can't do this. And then we gave guidelines around, you shouldn't use, so to tell you what we initially rolled out, we have Google Suite, so Gemini was available to everybody, and we have ChatGPT as well, and we gave ChatGPT to a certain amount of people, and we just said, this is what you can and can't do. We could put features and controls in place around some of them, but we just gave guidelines. And then after that, we said, after that, you can implement any AI tool you want. We do not want shadow AI across the company. Yeah. And that was the reason we did that. We were like, we are totally on board with you having any AI tool, but it must go through IT. So, because we want to make sure they're not training on data, we want to make sure they're not exposing customer data, all of that piece. So any of the LLMs we use, we have 0 data retention agreements in place with them, and it goes through IT, and they will do a full security review, privacy review on them, and if it's approved, then it sits in the approval list, and then you can go ahead and do it. And if there's some reason that we don't approve it, it is down to security, and that's the reason. So and on so after we did our core piece, then HR then rolls it out across the company, and they have training. So we have prompt training. There's a element of the regulatory training, which is the privacy piece, and the AI piece that needs to be done. So we do that, and then underneath that, we do prompt training for people. We do classes on different trainings all the time to get people able to use it, because it's one thing saying, here's ChatGPT, go and use it. If they don't know how to use it effectively, it doesn't make,
And in terms of the delivery of your work as well, right? It has to be there. And the AI regulation is very much around the use cases, not necessarily the actual technology. It's not like GDPR in terms of a horizontal regulation across the organization. So there are areas where it might touch on for future clients that you have within those sort of spaces. So the fact that you got the governance in place is quite important. And the fact that you're actually operating it yourself, so it's essentially an outsourced service, I think that may be a way in which clients that could potentially be adopting high-risk applications could almost offset that risk from having it internal, but actually outsource it with that business process, people element with the technology. So I think there may be an opportunity just going forward, and just thinking about it out loud, that is a really nice way to kind of almost insulate an organization from the regulatory oversight that comes down the line. One more thing in this sort of space, the omnibus proposals around GDPR, basically streamlining the harmonized standards for all digital regulations, came out about a week ago. The EU AI Act has essentially been pushed out in terms of high risk. Well, it hasn't, it's been recommended. But the biggest one is around GDPR, which is around being able to train models on user data without any explicit consent in that. What's your view?
My view on the training on user data?
Yeah, from a privacy perspective, like privacy was part of your kind of core for the better part of 7-8 years. And given your insight into privacy, how much does that actually hollow out the core value proposition of what the GDPR originally stood for?
I think the user data comes down to a lot of, is the user data publicly available online? We live in this really weird digital society where people put everything and anything online, and it's something I always tell my children. Anything you put online is there forever. There's obviously the cases where they were scraping things off Reddit, and Reddit were taking cases. And then you've got the New York Times case where it was about where they found it was actually the copyrighted material that was the issue. I think the whole reason around GDPR was to safeguard people's rights and the privacy around it. A lot of people don't understand that when you use things like Facebook and you use all that thing, you do put a lot of your user data online. And I think there's a wider big tech issue around where your data goes, what it's used for. Like, there is so much marketing, selling of data that goes on that people don't actually realize, bidding kind of stuff goes on in the background. And that needs to be protected, because it's the same thing of we have a conversation about, I don't know, I'll say we have a conversation about Christmas jumpers and we're sitting here and our phones are on, and then suddenly a few minutes later, Christmas jumpers are on our phone. Yes. I mean, that's you're like, what? So
a little unnerving.
Yeah, you're like, where did that come from? Yeah. So there is that element of, I didn't agree to that. And when you actually, if you go on, I remember seeing a presentation given on the whole how the bidding piece works, and your data's been sold for say it's 25 cents or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact, or a cent, but it's constantly sold all the way. And if people actually really understood that, they'd be really worried. And then you've got your data been sold, not data sold, but it's transferred over for the algorithms to target you on certain marketing and advertising and all that kind of thing. And then that moves into where it becomes dangerous because it's targeting you in ways that are not right. And I could go into that and talk about how it's damaging in social media perspective, and from a kid's perspective, God, I could go down a rabbit hole of that one. From a privacy perspective, I don't think that's correct. And I will say one thing, that now that you've given me that question, I will say that when we look at privacy and all that piece even for children should be a very special category of data. And I think children even should be, we should be bringing in legislation like they've done in Australia, and I think might be Denmark, under 16, that should be protected. And we don't do a good job of that. So children shouldn't be on social media. It's not right for them. I think, and it comes back to all that, the algorithms and selling of data, because children are just so malleable and pliable, and it's really not good for them. So I think if you're asking me about, that is where I would
draw the line.
Yeah. And do you know what's interesting, actually? Because China, who are very much on, they literally, you've got one card and the card tells you where people are and they locate you, and it's a real big brother kind of system. What's interesting is they don't allow people, people on their children on social media. Like they have a lot of restraints in place around social media and all that kind of stuff, which is super, like when you think about it, you're like, well, they'll blast us with everything.
Yeah.
But they have loads of protections in place for their children and everything else. So, yeah, they're definitely things that I would like to see the government bring in around those pieces, but I don't think we address them properly as a society overall. But I think that comes down from like big tech having a lot of sway in what regulations.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking is the omnibus proposal just seems like it's hollowing out GDPR because once that data is trained in the model, and my interpretation of it is that that data is already trained into the models.
Yeah.
And essentially what they don't want is the future liability of being hit with future lawsuits coming down the line from the AI office around how they used data without consent. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Yeah, I think it will come out in the wash eventually that that's what's happened if I read the tea leaves. But let's see. When kind of a little bit of a turn away from technology, that's, we don't all live in a tech world, but let's talk about equity and inclusion. You came into your career through law. You've recently been recognized on the GC Power List, which is amazing. Congratulations. And then, you've got a couple of portfolios or 3 portfolios: legal, workplace, and security. That is a really powerful place to be in terms of, looking over all of those aspects. So it's a very broad area. Which means that you have to talk to the board and be represented on the board given those particular roles. So from a gender perspective, do you feel included? Is there a wide range of representation, or is it more still a boys' club and you are fighting a lone fight?
Yes, we do have a very balanced leadership team. And that's something we kind of, when we were hiring, we did a lot of thought around. It was, for example, sales has always just been a very, I would say, when I started out, very male-dominated area. I've seen that expand with women. A lot of females coming into sales, and I've seen quite a few female sales leaders. Our CRO, Michelle, is a fantastic woman. She is one of the best I've worked with, and she's a brilliant female leader, but they are few and far between. And I think that a lot of that comes down to is people have taken breaks. And it's a little bit like actually when you're at the law library, if you take those breaks, it's very hard to regain that momentum in your career, unless you've got a supportive, I think, company when you were doing it. I was at Zendesk at the time, and they were a brilliant company to work for, absolutely amazing. And I just was really supportive when I was there going through maternity. So it didn't hamper me career-wise to go off and take that maternity and come back. When I joined them, I already had 2 children, but I had twins while I was there. So I still did one maternity with them, and I came back and I was still able to grow my career. So I was really lucky. And I've been able to find a good balance between having children and being able to still grow career-wise. And they're also really good at, family comes first. That's really kind of, everybody on the team has children. If you need to go off and you need to do something with the kids, go off, do it, come back and do the work whenever. It's, there is a really good balance, and I'm not sure that a lot of companies would do the same. But I still think, look, if I sat here and said, I don't think that there's an equity divide among what you see today with men and women in different positions, I'd be completely lying to you, or I'd be like sugarcoating it. Of course there is. There's a lot more because women take time out. However, what we do is, and I think this is probably across tech, I'm not sure about every industry, but I know tech companies, what they did do is we now call it paternity leave. It covers men and women. And every tech company I've been in has done it this way since probably a good couple of years. They will do equal paternity for men and women. So you, like women, if you got say 6 months paid leave, men also got marginally the same. Like some companies will do 4 months, but some companies will do 6 months the same. So men are out for the same amount of time. So it doesn't matter if you're interviewing, like if I was interviewing you, I don't know if your wife is pregnant at home and she could be about to have a baby and I have no idea. And you get the job and you're like 2 weeks later, well, actually my wife just had a baby and gone for 6 months. And you're like, oh my God. And you're like, cool, okay, well, I didn't know that. Whereas I think the bias then comes in if someone is sitting across from you and they're pregnant, and that's really hard for a woman. And I do know someone who's in that position at the moment, and she's like, I can't even go, like, I can't go for a job because I'm pregnant. I know automatically they're going to go, am I really going to hire this person? 3 months' time, they're going to be gone out maternity leave. So there's an automatic, she automatically feels like she can't go for the role. I'm like, well, you can explain to them and say you really like the company, you really want to, see how it goes. And if they don't want to hire you, then do you really want to work for them? But at the same time, it depends on the company if they really have a need for that person straight away. Yeah. But it's about having that conversation up front as well. But again, I think a lot of companies probably brought in the equal maternity and paternity, and they have no idea, even from the financial perspective, of how to gauge how many of those people will be out for a certain amount of time. But it levels the playing field. And that was the brilliant thing, because now you are hiring men and women and you've no idea who's in and out. And that made it, I think that is probably why we see a lot more women continuously in those sales roles and equally as good as the men. Yeah. Like, of course we are.
There was a mic drop moment there. So just kind of bringing it back kind of personally to you, as you joined the company, there's a West Coast based organization, you're based in Dublin. How do you kind of, or what are your non-negotiables from like a mental health boundaries perspective, in terms of being able to actually deliver like good service, but actually, you know what, I'm not going to be there for the 6 o'clock and the 7 o'clock and the 8 o'clock and the 9 o'clock call. I'm handing the baton over to the team. Yeah. Like, is that where is your own personal kind of space around that? And this is, again, I'm looking at it from a leadership perspective, and leaders often need to live out loud. How are you owning up to that?
Yeah, I think there is a leadership by example piece that you need to live yourself. So the team I have is based from New York to San Francisco, and I would generally work in New York hours because it actually now that fits with the way my family life is at the moment, because I can kind of get up, get the kids out to school, and then I would start work. So I would start like 10 o'clock in the morning, and it works for me just the way things are, like the way the age the kids are, that kind of thing. And I'm working remotely at the moment. Hopefully we'll have an office next year. And I hope, Matt, you're listening to that. Because it'd be nice to get out of my house. So it is, so getting out, I'm at home during the day, and that balance works because the kids come home and I'm there when the kids get back, and we can then, have dinners together and all that kind of piece works. And then I can hop back online later to check things and do things. So I would generally do any of the paperwork based stuff, or, that kind of, obviously it's not paperwork, but that kind of focus time, I suppose, during the day. And then in the evening, I will get on and do calls. I tend to, Friday would be the one where I'm like, look, I'm not really around for that. And my calls would be kind of pushed into the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Around end of quarter, obviously that's just busier and it is what it is. But I would tend to try and push them into the middle of the week.
Flexibility is the piece.
Yeah. And then if there's something where my kids are something that needs to be done, I just block out that hour or whatever, just so I can be there for them for that. So there's an element of, I know Michelle, who is also on the podcast, did something which was really interesting just on the whole, like, you know, boundaries piece. And one thing that I did take from it, which I did start to do, is do meetings while you do walks in the evening, which is actually good because my poor dog needs to be walked a bit more. And I did one the other day and they were like, where are you going? Are you on the way to the pub? And I was like, no, I'm having a walking meeting. Here's my dog. But obviously it's dark and they're like sitting in the light in San Francisco and they were like, but anyway, I was like, I'm turning off my camera now. But yeah, so that is actually, I'd kind of forgotten about that. I hadn't done it in a while. So it was a nice little kind of tip to pick up from her, of just doing one or two of them, because you don't need to be on like, there is some stuff that will be pushed up on the screen and you do need to be looking at slides and everything else, but the majority of it you just need to be able to listen to it. So so that's how I work it, and I've always worked with the US. I'm also a night owl. I do my best work in the evenings, which works for this type of company. I'm not great in the mornings. So
Okay, this sounds like a setup made for you.
yeah.
So I want to kind of, now that we've kind of zoomed in on you, I actually want to kind of pull out completely in terms of, let's have a look at a macro view. So with Crescendo and the new licensing model in terms of outcome based, if we have a look at Ireland and we look at the way that Ireland has been set up in terms of its investment vehicles, right? It's really around putting bums on seats inside companies, whether it's coming in terms of external investment or startups that are being kind of spun up in Ireland. You know, is that going to be sustainable going forward, considering AI, considering the change from almost like inefficiencies as a way in which to compound bums on seats versus outcomes? Because you can now achieve potentially, and I'm not saying it is, but you could achieve the outcome with, say, 50 exceptional engineers or exceptional business analysts, or whatever the case may be, versus 500 with the use of AI, because you're taking the cognitive load out of your mind and placing a lot of it into the AI, and then you're overseeing the work that is coming down the line. So it's a very big shift coming down the line. So do you think that is going to be a problem going forward, given what you're seeing coming out of Silicon Valley, because that link between Ireland, Dublin specifically, and San Francisco, kind of Bay Area, is very tight. And if that model is going to change, there is potentially some choppy water ahead.
Well, I think Ireland has always been a hub for San Francisco, like just in terms of, you have to walk out the door from here and there's like tech companies everywhere.
Heavy.
They're not, like, obviously there was at one point where people were talking about taxes and everything else, and when people move and are all that, like, the reality of it is they're not going to move. They're too embedded here. What we really have going for us is there's a huge workforce here that are multilingual, but English is the first language. So we don't, like, bar Amsterdam, which would be the other kind of hub that a lot of companies set up in.
Yeah.
Dublin is really, or Ireland is really kind of the main hub in Europe. So for an EMEA presence, this is kind of the place to be. It is also, like, because obviously London was the place to be originally, and then Brexit happened and people are now looking at the two as two separates. So it's like, well, we will set up in Dublin, but we will also set up in London. And it's kind of figuring out where do they set up first. And I see that a lot with, I think there's a lot of AI startups in London. I've seen a huge amount of them set up there and pull an office in there. That is just to do with London is such a big hub.
It's a market in itself.
It's, you know, Brexit never affected that. Like, it kept, you know, not kept it going, but it just kept that hub market it's just like, it's like a mini ecosystem. So I think that has to be respected in its own right. And irrespective, there will always be satellite offices in London. People will come here for workers. They will come here for all of that. It's also cheaper. People don't want to live in London. So when we were looking at the EMEA expansion, we were looking at both London and Dublin first. And a lot of our customers at the moment that we are starting to work with are London based. And when we start to look at that satellite piece, there are lots of companies that come over to San Francisco and do like meet and greets and everything else. And one of them that came over is actually an affiliated company to the UK government. And they come over and they just, said to us, look, we will give you all this like free legal advice, accounting advice. They were brilliant. I got on the phone with them, like, because if we set up an entity, you need to do everything from open bank accounts to, and they were like, we can do this intro to HSBC for you. And like, all of this is literally handed to you in a very neat package with a bow on top. And you're like, how else could we not do it? And then they also introduce you. So what they can't do is like introduce you to one contact. So as if they're preferential because they're a government-based entity. Yeah. But what they do is they will invite you to all the different tech events that are on. They will do all of that, get you involved in anything you need to do to launch your business over there. So they're very much focused on London, getting you in there. They will show you all different office spaces, tell you where to go, help you with all of that. So it makes it very easy to set up an entity, which is, that stuff is kind of easy enough to do, but like setting it up, but then like, organising the bank accounts, pensions, all that kind of stuff that comes with it. And then talking to you about the recruiting piece, which is interesting because London is very expensive people to live in. I lived there for 2 years. We lived just outside, close to Wimbledon, and I actually really enjoyed my commute in. It was probably the peace and quiet I had during the day. But I lived on a nice tube line that went overground, so it was lovely. But people generally, by the time they pay for the tube in and out, and she was saying this to me, you won't get people to come and go into the office. But we had at the time an amazing office in Zendesk, and everybody came in, and everybody just had fun in the office. But that culture, I think, is gone. And to build that culture, you won't really get it. Dublin's different in that respect. Yeah. You will get people to come into an office maybe 2, maybe 3 days a week. And you will also, you'll get more, like there will be more people living closer and they won't be living so far out. So there won't be that thing of, oh, I'm not going to come into an office. I think you'll be able to hire more in. So yes, I think people are probably going to pick both. Where they go first is still up for grabs. I think the UK probably has a slightly bigger pull on just, they have a lot more startups, there's a lot more entities there. We have a lot of the bigger tech sitting here. I think that's probably a bit of an issue. But irrespective, we also have a good DPC. So for the one-stop shop for when you're looking for your DPC to work with, we have a really good DPC. So a lot of people also pick Dublin for that reason, rather than you working with another data privacy supervisor. So I think we have a lot of things going for us still here.
I was going to say the DPC is Data Privacy Commission.
Yeah. So Helen Dixon used to be there and she was amazing. But we have a really good, and they have a really good team there that grew hugely under Helen. And then, so there's a massive team there, but it's a really good, they're really responsive and everything else. And I know, just having worked with them over the years, we just have a really good one-stop shop. So I know that's a really big incentive for companies to set up here as well. Yeah. So I think we'll still remain a place for companies to set up. But I do think the way we've worked has changed because we're hybrid workers and people don't necessarily want office space anymore the way they used to. Yeah. So that has definitely changed, which is a pity since COVID. Because I do feel I think when you have people coming into offices, they learn so much from peers, and we've lost that as well. So yeah, which was slightly off topic, but I would like to see more from the Irish side of things, though, because I haven't seen the same sort of we have the IDA who will give investment, but I haven't seen the same kind of thing as that amount of information given to us from London to set up there, which was huge. As for Dublin,
it's almost like they removed the friction. right? They removed the friction and just made it so easy for that to happen.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you very much for your time, for coming in to spend the time that you spent with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. It was lovely. Thank you.